Yeah, we go. Yeah, we go. Are you ready? COC. Why you dealing with the cyber threat when you know you got the era right? Yeah. You are not alone, don't do it by yourself. Get you some defense will help. If you know you won't be cyber free, come and get you some COC. Satisfying controls, lock them access points. We won't disappoint. COC, fight cyber threats. Promise you will not regret. We go deep and penetrate. COC, come and see.
Hey. All right. Welcome back to another episode of Crump on Cyber. Let's see. Today we're going to really kind of continue on a theme from last Wednesday when talking about cybersecurity careers. Today, the focus is going to be on veteran transitions. So I am a veteran. I spent 6 years in the Air Force and also spent 4 years in the Coast Guard. So the 6 years I was in the Air Force. The first year I was doing some slightly different types of things. And then I ended up in a technology school and began my career as a computer operator. And I worked for a unit called the Air Force Technical Application Center. So this unit, based just south of Cape Canaveral near Cocoa Beach, Florida, was responsible for monitoring the 1963 nuclear test ban treaty. So we kept, if anything went boom in the sky or in the ground or underneath the water, well, we'd know about it. And then just kind of depending upon, what it was, the leadership would determine whether to send out a resource and maybe get a little bit more information about that. So it's kind of interesting to see, Chernobyl back in the news, because back in the day when Chernobyl first showed up on the radar, well, it was our unit that was part of the detection element and then sent out assets to collect information. The processing laboratory for AFTAC at the time was actually over at McClellan in California. So we packaged up all of our systems, went to California, and ran things out there in support of that incident. Now, of course, we see Chernobyl back in the news with regard to what's happening between Russia and the Ukraine. But I did. I started my career really all of the training and the foundational knowledge and skills that I acquired from the outset were provided by predominantly actually the U.S. Marine Corps. So I spent a lot of time up in the Virginia area going to technology schools hosted by the U.S. Marine Corps, and they were at the time they were world class. Everybody knew about these particular schools. Now I don't know if they're still doing that stuff or not. The systems that I was working on at the time were IBM mainframe systems, and so I don't know how that has played out for the mainframe, IBM mainframes for the military over time, or if AFTAC still has those things. But yeah, so received all of my, really kind of accelerated kind of training there. The basic training, well, that came from the Air Force, and that was at Keesler down in Mississippi kind of a thing. But then I left there, ended up at AFTAC, and then, got into the computer operations and did that for a little bit, and then applied to move on, to kind of progress, to get promoted into the systems programming realm. And then that's how I ended up going off to a whole multitude of different kind of schools offered and hosted by the Marine Corps. Also in there, I did go to some additional training by the Air Force, some programming school, assembler programming, although I was really kind of doing some of that already. I did go to Oklahoma. I believe it was Tinker. I think Tinker is if I recall correctly, Oklahoma for programming school. And so that really, and then it really spent the majority of my time at AFTAC there. Got out, did some consulting work, and then did some other things along the way. But really, the training that I received in the military really kind of set the tone for, hey, me being here right now, and especially up to my ears in a bunch of this DoD related cybersecurity stuff that's happening in the world these days as part of the defense supply chain stuff. So it started off in that manner, and so we talked a bit about last week about this pathway, into the military for people that want to enter the field of cybersecurity. But that's not a path for everybody, and certainly I think it's safe to say times have changed, certainly on lots of different levels to that degree. But the military is a great launching point for folks. And so we want to kind of take a deeper dive into the military, the construct of the entities that are in there, the agency, the DoD, and the military branches, and look at that and just see, some of the issues they're having these days about recruiting challenges and what might be leading to that. And then ultimately, we'll talk about this transition. So we know we've got tons and tons of really smart, well-trained professionals coming out of the military on a constant basis. And last week we talked about that there were 770,000 open cybersecurity jobs in the United States. So there is plenty of room in industry, it would seem, for these veterans to just kind of roll off. And so we're going to explore that, and we're going to actually have a guest on, and we'll talk about that and see, well, how well is that transition program working out, and have somebody that can speak firsthand about just the latest greatest that the military is offering for transition services and support for veterans. So let's maybe take some time and better understand the military itself and some of these recruiting goals, because it's if the military is a great pipeline for industry, and we have some recruiting challenges, then inherently that tells us we're going to get a few less folks at some point coming out into industry, and that certainly will make things more difficult with regard to hiring seasoned professionals to roll right into some of these mid-level and senior level types of roles that are open in the cybersecurity field. So, based upon some data from Military One, the total force personnel that we have out there, 2 million. This is based on 2021 data. That was all I could find that was available. 2021 data, 2,586,000 military personnel. Now, only about half of those are actually active duty, 51.6%. And that puts you at 1.3 million. There's an what's called a ready reserve, and that has 1 million folks in it. That sits right just below 40% of that 2.5 million number. Retired reserve, that's 7%. That's about 90,000 people. Coast Guard active duty is rolled up under that number. Coast Guard's an interesting branch. They go in and out of they're certainly part of the considered military, but not necessarily reporting into the DoD unless we have pulled them into active duty for warfighting types of things. But we have 40,000 individuals out there in the Coast Guard that we did at the time, and then a very, very, very small number that are part of uh, 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 a smaller reserve body called the Standby Reserve. In the active duty, so if we're looking at that 1.3 million number plus the 40 K for the Coast Guard, so you've got 40K in the Coast Guard. You got 482,000 or 22% of our active duty in the Army. Got 343,000 or about 16% in the Navy. Just under 180,000 or 8% in the Marine Corps, 330,000 in the Air Force, and that represents about 15%, and then just under 1,700 folks in the Space Force, and that's just 0.1%. 80% of those numbers are enlisted personnel. And what's encouraging, and frankly, I was a little surprised by this number, 24% have bachelor's degrees or higher. So one of the things that cybersecurity hiring managers will certainly look at, right, is okay, well, what's this education? It's one of the big challenges for those that are kind of new into the cybersecurity field, and it's this big, kind of a discussion. Is if you got an entry level person, would you hire somebody that has an undergraduate degree in cybersecurity but no experience, or somebody without a degree but maybe 1, 2, 3 certifications and no experience? And we ran a poll on this. Gosh, I want to think it's probably 2 years ago, and I think on a scale of 2 to 1, the lean there was towards the ones with the certifications. Now, experience is the gold here, right? That's how you plate all of the any degrees that you've got, or any certification that you've got. If you've got some real world experience, or really, I mean, frankly, to be honest with you, any kind of real experience is going to be valuable. Now, out there working for an employer, that's great, but you can get experience in lots of different ways. And I always encourage those that are new to the field to just go off and start doing stuff. Start doing cybersecurity stuff and start posting it on your social media. And at some point, you're probably going to draw some attention, and people will be like interested in what you're talking about, and you might get invited to an interview, kind of a thing. But what it does, it indicates here in this case that, not only are the folks coming out of the military highly educated, but they do have this real practical experience. Most I haven't, most of the enlistments, I recall, 4 or 6 year type of a minimum. So, the enlisted folks are coming out of boot camp, and, just depending upon the branch, but typically they go to some kind of a technical school, and they get that, and then they go get a little real world experience at their unit under their belt. And then as time progresses, they start backing that up with either a degree. Maybe they're going to pursue university while they're in the military, and or some professional certifications, and so they really kind of come out of there with a powerhouse of education and certifications and experience. So always, it tends to be a great recruiting pool for sure. We're looking for resources, but folks can get that in lots of different ways. It doesn't mean you have to go to the military. You can get that on your own, in private industry. But if you got those things, then you're definitely a high value type of an individual. So we've got all those big numbers, right? Really, really big numbers, 2.5 million type of a thing. Well, we've heard in the news lately that the military is going through some recruiting challenges. For 2023, it looks like the Army is going to fall short of their recruiting goals by about 12,000 personnel. The Navy is going to end up about 6,000 short, and the Air Force about 10,000 short. The other branches doing just fine. So we've got those kind of a numbers. So what we'll see out there is, well, what's the roadblocks? You know, it didn't seem like, you got to go back a long ways to when we were having recruiting shortage in recruiting, meeting recruiting goals in the military. It doesn't seem like, that's been in the news for a very, very, very long time. So what's happening? Well, certainly, some of the things out there, we got low unemployment. So it's a competitive market. So anybody that, really has any of this experience or certifications or other types of things, if they can land a job, they're going to do just fine. And this military route isn't going to really kind of be a strong sell for them. There was a COVID-19 was certainly created some challenges. They did look at things like DoD policies, so the quote unquote wokeness. And when that has certainly had an effect as well. And when you consider how the military branches are comprised from a political perspective, if that gives you, any kind of an indicator, 48% Republican, 28% Democrat. Those are, you know, soft numbers, but that's a ballpark, and that's pretty typical. I talked yesterday about, I always felt like most everybody in the military were Republicans, and but clearly that's not the case. Yeah, just about half Republican and a third Democrat. So you know um that's a challenge if you have a policy that conservatives don't necessarily agree with, and that would tend to be, yeah, things like wokeness or COVID-19 mandates. Yeah, you're gonna regardless of what employer you are, you're gonna run into some challenges pulling in uh, conservative, potentially Republican folks. Now that that may be exactly what your company is hoping for, so that who knows, kind of a thing. But it is certainly a factor. And then medical is part of that. We you talked yesterday about some folks are just not prepared. They can't meet the minimum requirements to get into the military, and so those are certainly challenges. And given what's happened in our world, and it seems like ADHD has just, I don't know, just has been, we hear a lot about that, and kids that are being medicated by ADHD, uh, if they haven't been off that particular medication for a couple of years, it seems like that could actually disqualify somebody to enter the military. I recall seeing something like that out there. So don't hold my foot to the fire. I'm not a military recruiter. Okay, so if you're interested in that stuff, you got to go do your own research. Right? I'm just here to stir the waters a little bit. All right. The goal going into 2014, that number actually for the militaries drops off a bit, so just over 2 million, and that is certainly a reduction from 2023. And we can imagine that, yeah, there's certainly some optimization that's going on and some automation that's going on into the military. And we're seeing a bunch of this stuff out there for drones and drone ships and drones in the sky and all this automated types of stuff. It requires less humans to be there, and so that number seems to be kind of dropping off a bit. And so that's important to kind of consider that as the years go by, that pathway into the military may get a little more competitive, given some of the things that the military can offer to those that are in it. The training and the education and those kinds of real incentives. Now, to kind of help offset some of the current recruiting woes that the military does have, the one of the things they're doing is offering recruiters themselves quarterly bonuses. So if they meet their goal, then the recruiter can earn $4,500 a quarter. All right. And then for the enlisted folks, if you're an E1 through E3, which is the lowest three ranks of the enlisted force, uh, if if you recommend somebody and that person actually enlists in the military, you get a promotion. It's like you automatically move up one pay grade. Now you can only have one of those of your career, so it's not like you can go out and recruit 9 people and then be the next master chief of the of the Air Force or anything like that. No, you can't do that kind of a thing. So as you can imagine, right, in an organization like our federal government, the DoD in particular, is seeing this dropping off and struggling to meet their recording goals. They got to ask themselves, well, why is that? Well, we saw some of that stuff, some of these other factors, low employment, COVID policies, wokeness, medical, those kinds of things for sure. But when they surveyed the individuals, they went out and surveyed and got 600 respondents back. And these are folks that are in the age of 16 to 28, and ask them about, hey, why would you dismiss the military as a career? Now, the Army didn't disclose a lot of stuff about what some of these findings were, but they did mention that one of the consistent messages across there was that it was not a safe or a good place for a career. Okay, so that's a bit of a reputational kind of a risk, and one of the sessions we'll do, here soon, because it's top of mind for me, is about this crisis of credibility that organizations and individuals are seeing, and so we got to talk about that. But yeah, there certainly is a bit of a crisis, a reputation crisis that the U.S. military is going through based upon some of these things. Now, some of the information they did share. So in those respondents, 5% said that wokeness is an issue. Okay, so depending upon where your mindset is, that might seem like a really low number or a really high number. 13%. There are women and minorities. They feel like they would face discrimination and not get the same opportunities. So I thought that number was really high. That's an unfortunate situation. And then 10% don't trust military leadership. And that speaks to what I was just talking about, this crisis of credibility that seems to just become pervasive across, well, society as a whole, maybe the globe. The Army recruiting head said that the top 3 reasons cited for rejecting military enlistment are fear of death, concerns about PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder, or leaving friends and family. But by a significant margin, the most common response, 20%, 1 in 5, I will be, uh, putting my life on hold. And that just kind of struck me as, wow, we are not doing a good job getting across the value of a military career. Some of those things we were just talking about, the training and education benefits. Certainly, right? Hope folks go in with the right mindset and motivations. But yeah, a lot of folks go into the military with, yes, I love my country, but I also want a free education, or I want this free training, and I want this experience. And so It's a great route. Okay. Now, pay isn't necessarily going to be out of the box something that draws people into the military. If you're an enlisted person and you start your career as an E1, so you've got less than 4 months under your belt, you're only making about $1,700 a month. Now, as you get a little more experience under your belt, then that jumps up a little bit here to about $2,000 or just about $2,000. And then if you get promoted once and now you've got a little bit of time, just under 2 years still, but you got promoted. Now you're at, just under, $2,200 a month. And then let's say you get promoted again, you're an E3 and you've got over 3 years and you're kind of, if you came in with a 4-year enlistment, you're kind of at that decision point. Do I stay or do I go? At that point, you're making about $2,500 a month. Okay. Now, contrast that to poverty levels. Okay. So if you were an E3 and over that 3-year period, maybe you came in single, maybe you got married, maybe you had a couple kids under your belt, right? So now you're a family of, let's call it 4, your spouse and your 2 children. Right? The poverty level there is $30,000 a year. The pay, if you take that $2,500 for an E3 with over 3 years, well, you're sitting at $30,564. So you've got a resource, highly trained, highly focused, highly motivated, who's just, with a family that's assuming their spouse isn't working, just over the poverty line. We're asking these folks to potentially put their lives on the line. Seems a little light. You're right. I can remember back in the day, when I joined, it was far less than that. Really, I mean, my goodness, I think I was making $600 or $700 a month, type of a thing. And so, that's a challenge, right? Contrast that with a minimum wage now that sits about $10 to $15 an hour, depending on what state you're in. So that translates into 20 to 30K. So really, you've got somebody in the military with 3 years of experience under their belt, and essentially they're earning minimum wage. Okay, that's a challenge. Now you take that same person, given a couple more years, right? So maybe they get promoted up to E5, 6 years under their belt. They're making $3,400 a month, plus some of the other kinds of benefits that they get, and that comes to $41,000 a year. Well, you remember I said 770,000 open cybersecurity jobs, entry level, which should be somebody with no experience. Those jobs pay starting somewhere between $50,000 and $80,000 a year. So if you add some experience on that, then those numbers certainly increase. So, the military, it's low unemployment, all those other kinds of things, but it's a competitive environment for these resources that are out there. So they know, and we all know, right? I'm a case. We're going to have a guest on here in just a second who's gone through this transition. Obviously, folks have to do that at some point, right? For a myriad of different reasons. So when we come back from our break, we're going to talk about this transition process that happens, some of the things that are out there, and then we'll actually get firsthand information from somebody that recently transitioned. All right. We'll be right back.
COC. We'll be right back, baby. COC's back. Come get you some.
All right. We are back and we have with us Logan.
Hey Jeff, how you doing?
Logan, I'm doing well. Yourself?
Good.
Yeah, great. So why don't you take just a minute or two and just kind of introduce yourself, and then we'll get into your background and do all a deeper dive into that. But maybe just something quick and to get the party started.
Sure. I'm within weeks of retirement from 24 years Navy service. I have my dream job working for a great company. I am a cybersecurity assessor, and it was a lot of work to get here, a lot of advice to actually listen to and follow. But I'm in a good place, and that's really thanks to a great support system. So, yeah, everything's going well.
Excellent. Well, that's always good to hear. Obviously, thank you for your service. Yeah, for sure.
Thanks, sir.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. All right. So, when somebody, if they have nothing to do with the military, they go out there and maybe they start using the old Googler and looking around, and they hear about this thing called the VA that's out there, and the VA's the Veterans Affairs, right? They've got all these kinds of benefits out there for folks that are in the military, the GI Bill, and but they also, VA talks a little bit about their educational assistant programs that are available. CISA, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, also talks about some support programs for folks transitioning. Did you see that stuff? Do you get that stuff? How does that stuff come to you as an active duty person that they know is about to transition?
It's a beast. So there's so many opportunities that the VA provides, and unfortunately, most military members don't get that information until their last year in the service, and that's my experience. Is I didn't get that until the last few years. Other than the post 9/11 GI Bill, or back in the day it was the Montgomery GI Bill, we knew about those things right up front. But all the other opportunities that are out there, it just wasn't known until you go through a transition class, and even the transition classes weren't a mandatory thing until over the past decade. So unfortunately it's a lot of word of mouth that you get, and then you have to go dig into what the VA actually offers, whether it's the internet. Again, when I came in, the internet really wasn't a thing where you'd find data on it, but it's usually the final year or two in the military that you get the data, and even at that point, it's still kind of fuzzy, because we sit through a class. My experience was sitting through a class for a week, and each person came and talked to you for about an hour. So you have an hour worth of data thrown at you, and then you have to go do your own homework after that.
Yeah, so there's no doesn't feel like a very personal experience. You didn't have an individual counselor or somebody that kind of walk you through that, or is it, here's stuff you need to consider, kind of go do it on your own, and best of luck to you, kind of a thing? Or
yes.
Okay. Yeah.
There's booklets.
There's lots of opportunities for excellence across all these programs, but yeah, okay, that's unfortunate. But yeah,
what makes a difference though, and this is the good part, right? That there's a lot of, and I wouldn't say negative. I just say there's lack of time, because in the military you have things to do, right? So we can't just go sit in classes all day learning about all the opportunities that we have from being in the military. But good leadership is what makes this successful, and that's, some of the positions I've been in have been able to get me up on the podium and say, hey, go check this thing out. Come to my office. Let's talk about this thing. Hey, gather around. Did you see this thing? Pulling it up online. Hey, I've noticed you're into this. Let's take a look at what other opportunities out there. So it's really good leadership that makes a difference in each military member's life.
That's That's great. That's commendable. One of the things, and we'll get to this. We'll touch briefly on the CMMC stuff, but as part of some of the training when I deliver, I tell folks, hey, look, this is new to everybody, right? For the most part. So, it's that whole, that phrase of a rising tide lifts all ships. Well, we're kind of in it together, right? So we didn't need to kind of, help and support each other all along the way as part of that. And
Absolutely.
so, yeah, bringing that. That mindset to the ecosystem is highly valued, and so I appreciate that perspective. Now, in the military branches, we in this day and age with so much technology, we look across, the Space Force, the Air Force, the Army, the Marine Corps, the Coast Guard. Everybody's got some kind of a technology and a cyber security element these days. Now, you're coming from a Navy background, so walk me through, well, how you really kind of get started. Did you were you at university and then you went the traditional ROTC route, or did you go to an academy? How did you end up on this road and then ending up in this cybersecurity space? Did you come in knowing, hey, that's what I want to do with my life?
All right, well, we only have 24 minutes left, but I have the most untraditional road there is, at least as far as I know. I didn't make it past ninth grade, and I ended up, I was a musician. I went to school for music after getting my GED, and it was one of those days where everything was going sideways. And a recruiter called me and said, "Hey, come on in," right? And we talked about it and said, "How would you like to go into the military? Here's some job opportunities. And by the way, if you join the submarine force, we'll give you an extra $50 a month." And I said, "All right, I'm in." And this is
It was
1999.
like so that was like winning the lottery, right?
Right. So I ended up getting a choice within. Well, I picked the submarine electronic computer field, and I ended up being a submarine sonar technician, which was a lot of electronics at the time, not much networking. We're talking about 8 megabyte bus system. It was very low tech, but eventually we moved into giggy networks, and I just learned as I did. When they would install a new system, we're getting a new system installed, and I learned how to break it and fix it. So that I was enlisted for about 11 years. I got good advice from a very sad situation when I was about 2 or 3 years in, and it was a gentleman who was retiring, and he had told me he was just upset because he felt like he'd wasted his life. He was retiring at 20 years. He didn't own a home. He had no college. It just everything that he could have had a chance to do, he didn't do it, and he felt it was too late. So I really took that on board, and I started taking PACE classes. PACE is another educational opportunity for the military, well, for the Navy at least. And I would stay up in my sleep time and do college, and then when I would get home, I would try to finish it up. Meanwhile, juggling kids and spouse and trying to be a good father and husband while taking these again while I probably should have been sleeping. So I got my bachelor's degree through that in education. I ended up getting a commission without having a degree requirement as a limited duty officer into the submarine electronic repair field, and dealt with more and more networking, network installs, testing. But throughout this my 24 years, it was all based around security as well. I ended up getting my first job as an officer was as a security officer. So I dealt with physical, personnel security, network security, all the information security realm, policy development, implementation, training folks, making sure that I was monitoring for the training that was being effective, the whole gambit. So about, again, following guidance of a lot of folks, I think I made good choices. But about 2 years out, and I'll back up, there's a lot of advice I got over the years was, hey, you'll know it's time to get out of the military when you know it. And I didn't really understood that until I knew it. I was like, okay, it's time to move on. And it was about 2 years out. And that seems like it might have been perfect timing, because I sat down one day and said, if I were to open my own business tomorrow, what would I want to do to come in and be passionate about succeeding every day? How would I keep my business successful? And it took me a while, but it ended up being the security field. So I now I know I want to be in the security field. 2 years out from my retirement date, I ended up calling a friend who had already transitioned out. He was pretty successful, and I said, "Hey, how do I get into the security field?" And he said, "Well, what part of the security field do you want to get in?" And I'm flabbergasted. Wait, is it that broad? So I spent the next year trying to figure out where I wanted to go into it. And during that time, I tried to certify every time somebody said, "Hey, you need to get certified A plus." That's a thing that actually matters. Or you need to get certified Network Plus or Security Plus or Cybersecurity Analyst Plus, all the pluses, CISSP. I'm like, okay, I'll just do that. I'll do that. So again, while juggling a family and a job, I'm up in my sleep time trying to certify things, and I did. But that led me to another great opportunity. Again, following the guidance of other folks. There's a skill bridge program in the military. It changes who it's open to kind of often. Well, I'd say often, but over the past 5 years, it's changed 3 times, I believe, to who's allowed to join it. And in the higher rank, the more restricted it is, pretty much. But I was able to get into a program with a company, and I had no idea what CMMC was, but they were absolutely CMMC fueled, and they said, "We're not going to let this gentleman pass up with all the security experience." So I went and sat with an organization as an intern for 4 months, doing CMMC internal auditing, making sure compliance requirements were met. And I kind of fell in love with it because I was like, wait a second, this is what I've been doing for forever. But with NIST 853 requirements, and it was so overlayable that I said, this is something I enjoy. This is something I know, and you don't really get that with the military because every time you learn something, you move to a different job. So about every 3 years, you go learn something new. So it was exciting. It is exciting that I get to actually become a subject matter expert and try to stay a subject matter expert for as long as I can.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's brilliant. Yeah. Certainly folks with your kind of a background or, they don't last long in the open marketplace. That's for sure, especially with what's happening with the CMMC, as you noted there. So, all of those, those types of responsibilities that you were talking about there in the Navy, certainly going to, parlay well into this whole CMMC space. What's the really kind of, this transition that you went through, you're actually still going through right now. How do you see yourself? Do you want to be on the, you mentioned the assessor side. Now, there's lots of different places, out there and lots of different capabilities or responsibility in the cybersecurity space. You want to go out and do implementation stuff, or you prefer to kind of come back and stay on that audit or assessment side of the house?
I think doing both is where my goals lie, and there's a reason for that. I've been an assessor for things that I'm not the technical expert on. And I've been a technical expert on things that I'm not an assessor on. And I think there's some balance that's missing on that, because I may think I have a full understanding on how to assess something, but if I've never done it, I've never felt the hardships or understood the complexities of actually implementing some of these rules, I may not be a good assessor. So I think it's important to be able to consult, to implement, and also to be able to assess.
Yeah, we get a lot of folks, and I'm sure you've run across a fair share yourself, that very diverse backgrounds, right, that are entering this new CMMC space, and it's finding a home for them. But because of the diverse nature of the control bodies and those types of things, as well as the services that are needed by these companies, that there tends to be kind of a home for everybody. Now, one of the things I tell the CCP and CCA students is just beware that when you, especially, coming out as a CCP and a CCA, the market is going to expect that you are now the end all be all of everything that there is to do with cybersecurity, and you are the subject matter expert for every single one of these controls and every single configuration setting that could possibly exist throughout the history of time, and that's just unrealistic. Right? That's not how it works. It's a lot like what you were just describing, where yeah, sometimes you're an assessor and you're not the subject matter expert. And so how do you recommend, since you found yourself in that situation in the past, what are some of the things you can recommend to your fellow assessors on how to deal with those kinds of situations? Or maybe you're just not
Sure.
the rock star.
I have my favorite answer already lined up for this. Networking, understanding other and meeting people in the field that you can reach out to and go, hey, I don't really understand this. Can you help me? Can you help me kind of break it down? In a way that doesn't interfere or make doesn't interfere with what you're actually assessing. I mean, you don't want to cross lines there, but being able to have a peer support network that you can talk to. And if your organization is large enough, people within the organization, a good trust that you can have with your other fellow assessors that you can talk to and just understand things that you didn't understand. And at the end, we'll all be better for it. Humility,
Yeah.
I guess, is the key for that. I don't know
Yeah,
this. Can
yeah.
you help me?
It's always, yeah, and that's that's what I tell people. Is like, look, yeah, just say you don't know, right? Or answer enough probing questions up front so that and for the next discussion you bring the rock stars with you, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
nothing wrong with bringing some friends to the conversation. That's for sure. Now, because of the relationship between the CMMC and the DoD, as part of that career transition information, were they, do they see this coming? Are they making overt references to, hey, look, you're a cybersecurity person, you're coming from the military, and oh, guess what's happening in private industry, this whole ecosystem around this same stuff, you should go out and pursue it.
No,
No.
no, I didn't. So I know CUI implementation, and I lived the implementation of that. I think starting 2019, they said, "Hey, here's CUI. Here's everything it replaces, and line it up. Make sure it's on all your stuff." But coming from the military out, I didn't really see that advertised well. But I'm a spokesperson now, so I'm grabbing everybody I can.
You're right. All right. Well, you hit on something actually pretty interesting there. So this whole challenge of, what is not CUI, right? So that is not, it's not just, the DoD started, the kind of that part, well, and say, with their DODI 5248, right? That implementation of the CUI program, then yeah, everybody's off running off doing the same thing. Now you've got private industry that's essentially trying to do the same kind of thing, right? If they weren't getting this stuff marked appropriately from the federal government, anywhere you look on, LinkedIn or out there, the big question is how do I know? How do I know? I had somebody in the first class, a CCP class. This is back in, October 2021. I remember he said, it's easy to say what CUI is, but not what is CUI. And so we hear a lot of companies, folks and representatives come to the training, ask us that same kind of question. So you had to deal with that. So what kind of sage advice can you offer up to these private companies, or these, companies that are out there having to go through a similar kind of an exercise right now?
So my experience is from the military is being able to label it properly from the source, and then understanding what you should be receiving in that source. As I understand it now, they just need to have a open line of dialogue with your contracting officer to understand what
Yeah.
you're receiving, and then have a good training program on how to receive that properly and how to maintain it afterwards.
Yeah, fix and go forward, right? And we talk about pushing back on the contract officer, pushing back on the prime or the sub above you, because that really yeah, as you stated, that responsibility really does set with the federal government in that space. So fantastic. What have you got queued up? What are you working on now relative to the CMMC? Any projects that helping some entities get ready or?
I can't dig too far, but I did just get onboarded with Kiri Solutions.
Oh,
So
fantastic.
I'm working with Amira Armand. Come to find out, she's a household name in the CMMC community, and she has me very busy, and I believe doing great things. So more to come on that.
Excellent, excellent. So for your fellow veterans that hadn't thought about this space or maybe are going through a transition now, what kind of advice or guidance would you offer up for them, your peers?
Networking. It's honestly networking, because the cybersecurity field is so vast. I did not understand how vast it was until I just started asking people and asking more questions, writing it down, come up with a flow chart, figuring out, do I want to be in pen testing? Do I want to be in compliance? Do I want to be the analyst? Do I want to be the guy writing policy? So many different fields out there, and it's to the point where you have to kind of go taste a few of them, and that's what I did. At least I'll speak for myself. I did the try hack me. I did hack the box. I've already done compliance. I've already done security assessments. So, it was trying to figure out which one I liked more. But in order to do that, you have to get out there. One of the things I also did was I became a co-lead for OWASP in Jacksonville, just so I can meet more folks and learn what they do and things I didn't know about. I joined a program called Meetups. I had to explain to my wife what that actually was, but it's completely legitimate. It's a place where I ended up meeting. There's technical groups that meet up in the area where I live. So that I've met programmers. I met web designers, cybersecurity folks, CISOs, just a whole gambit of folks. And I learned quickly what I didn't want to do and what I did want to do, and then narrowed it down from there. But networking is the big thing. You have to. I tell you what best worked for me, and then go from there. I guess I went on LinkedIn. I was sitting in another class. I want to bring it up before we go, but I was sitting on LinkedIn, and I typed CMMC into the search bar, and 100 or so people came up, and I was looking through profiles, and I just brought up the message. Hey, my name's Logan Therrien. I'm retiring after 24 years in the military security business. I'm interested in getting the CMMC field. I would love to connect. And I had such a welcome response from the community. If you can think of a name out there that's doing something with CMMC,
that's how we connected. I've received one of those.
that is exactly. So I must have sat through 4 or 5 hours of meetings after that, just meeting people, and that's ultimately how I got the position I have now. And it was through somebody that knew somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody. And it's a splash of luck, but it's also just getting out there and meeting folks, and then connecting.
Yeah, well, and that's what I was going to ask. Well, it's just a matter of good luck or perfect timing, and it sounds like a little bit of both there for you.
Good mixture.
Now, something you did mention that kind of jumped out at me because I'm very interested in this. You said you had a flow chart that you developed for yourself about trying to decide these fields or different pathways. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, it was more figuratively speaking.
Okay.
But just the different paths, right? Do I want to go on the offensive? Do I want to go on the defensive? If I want to go on the, do I want the compliance? And then what fields of the compliance, what fields of defensive are there? Physical penetration, network penetration. So it was kind of a flow chart. It was more of paper just
Gotcha. Well, the reason I ask is we actually have we have something out on the cybersecuritytrainingco.com website. I'm trying to think of can't remember what link it's under, but we have actually created something called a personality to cybersecurity careers probot. So you go through and it asks you just a couple of questions about your personality, and then you hit submit and it goes off, and it runs that against some of the more common cybersecurity fields, and it comes back and it sends you a PDF and says, hey, it's a little bit of like a little bit like a horoscope or personality profile. You're this kind of a person, and this is the kind of stuff you don't like, and therefore here are 2 or 3 fields in cybersecurity that might be a good fit for you, kind of a thing. So for folks that that have kind of been down this path, I'm always very interested in that, because I would love for you to take that and see how close to the mark. We've had pretty good results on that, but it's amateur psychology, so you never know.
Yeah, maybe put you in the field that that we need folks in. But no, that sounds like a great tool. That I kind of did that the hard way. I would love to see that. It's kind of like the Myers-Briggs for cybersecurity.
Yeah, and it actually it leverages some of the Myers-Briggs stuff in it as part of that process. So, yeah, brilliant. Great. So, from your just kind of wrap up from a CMMC perspective, you got your CCP on the way to CCA waiting for.
My CCP exam was at the soonest one they had after I took the course. So it's here in 7 days.
Oh, brilliant. Okay. Great. Well, yeah, best of luck on that. Lots of reading and stuff. Your background, though, you shouldn't have any challenge going through that. It's just the language of the CMMC, the controls. Well, if you've been doing 853, you'll be just fine there, right? It's this whole new language you have to learn as part of this.
Yeah, I think the hardest part of coming into CMMC right now is just so much flux, right? Do I follow the version 2? Do I look at the CMMC guides that we probably shouldn't have seen yet? Am I looking at the Rev 3 171? Which one am I actually learning here? So, but I think all of them are great, and I see good changes coming down the road.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Right. It's you got a 1.0, you got a 2.0. Well, you know what that means. There'll be a 2 point something or a 3 point something. There, change is, is the norm, not the exception, right? When you've got this stuff and our adversaries are constantly changing. So, yeah, I just, even people coming through, training now, I tell them, look, you're even 2 years, 3 years into this, you're still on the bleeding edge, right? So you're going to give up a little bit of blood along the way. There would be some changes, but hang in there. It'll get better, right? It always does. So, well, fantastic. Well, Logan, hey, it's been a pleasure meeting you, and I appreciate all the advice that you've offered up, and I'm sure there are some folks out there that will take that to heart and action, and will be grateful to you for helping them make that transition from the military into the private or industry cybersecurity, whether it's CMMC or not. So thanks so much, Logan.
Yes, sir. Can I make one more plug, please?
Of course, right. Absolutely.
So again, kind of the lesser known programs out there that support veterans in their transition process. It's Onward to Opportunity, and it's through Syracuse University, and it's funded by the big corporations out there, and they want certified tech folks to come out. So they'll pay for the training and then pay for one certification, and then once you're done with that certification, such as CISSP or Security Plus or even PMP, they'll pay for you to go through the rest of the training. They only pay through one certification, but it's free opportunities out there. And then vet tech as well. So I guess the final thing, though, is that anybody who wants to reach out to me and just talk, I'm more than willing to talk. Just hit me up on LinkedIn, and we'll go from there.
All right, brilliant. Thanks again.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Now you know you're feeling better after deep dosing on COC. what you want now. You say, well, we've got to go. See you next time.